Check this out. I mean, that's got to be fake, right? I mean, there's no way those guitars sound like that. Or do they? Stick with me. Let's find out. I'm Barry Villaverde, and over the years I posted a number of videos on Facebook and YouTube, and those of you who have taken the time to listen and watch them, thank you very much, by the way. I appreciate it. You've also, in doing so, given me suggestions of songs that I should try, and one of them that came up a bunch was Africa by Toto. So I thought about doing Africa for a long time, but I couldn't do it because there were two primary issues that I really couldn't overcome. One was the song required a lot of percussion or drums even. Maybe the combination would be even better. And I really couldn't do that. Enter my friend Brian Pitts, who is a drummer and a percussionist and brings with him a great vocal. It took care of that issue. Awesome. So thanks, Brian. But the second issue was the keyboard. You see, Brian and I are both players of the keyboard, but we're not keyboard players per se, if that makes sense. So all these parts that were played with keyboards by Toto, I think I could do them, but I would have to practice way too much for that. And being a guitarist, it just wasn't in the equation. So I had to come up with some other way to play those parts on the guitar. And I found a way. Check out these clips from the Africa video and listen to the sounds that are coming from me playing the guitar. Check it out.
The wild dogs cry out in the night as they grow restless.
Okay, it looks like I played the guitar but then somehow added those parts later with a keyboard, because a guitar doesn't sound like that. But it's real. What I played is what you heard on the Africa video. It's just magic. Well, actually, it's a little bit more technical than that. Let me explain. In the early 1980s, manufacturers of instruments, they tried to come up with some type of a solution where one manufacturer's instrument could communicate with another. They could talk with one another. So you could have like a Roland keyboard talking to a Yamaha keyboard, or a Boss drum machine communicating with a Korg drum machine, something along those lines. And so they came up with a technology called MIDI, M-I-D-I, and that's an acronym. It stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. And this allows communication between instruments that have this particular feature in the instrument. Now, a MIDI communication or a MIDI message contains no audio in it. It's just information. So you would have to actually supply some sound source to that MIDI information in order to hear something, which keyboards generally have sound sources in them, or drum machines have sound sources in them, drums. And so when the MIDI is played back, you can hear those various sounds. This is what a MIDI file looks like. You can see there are lines, and they correspond to a keyboard on the left, but they represent notes. And those MIDI lines contain a lot of information about the notes. They contain the pitch of the note, of course, but they also contain things like the attack of the note, the sustain of the note, etc., etc. All the things that color a note. Okay, so if you can get a MIDI file into a recording session, then all you'd have to do is add to that MIDI file some sound source. And in recording software, recording studios, that sound source is often an internal sound source in your computer using a virtual instrument. And if you can put that instrument and combine it with that MIDI message, that message will then have sound to play. So that's MIDI. Okay, so now the issue was, how can I make a guitar recording a MIDI file? Because if I could make my guitar recording a MIDI file and then add a virtual instrument on top of my guitar recording's MIDI file, then when I play the guitar, it'll sound like some other instrument, whatever virtual instrument I put on there. I hope that makes sense. Enter a fantastic program called Melodyne, M-E-L-O-D-Y-N-E. And what it is, in a simple way, is a note editor. It could do a lot of things, but primarily, for the sake of this video, what it does is it will analyze audio, change that audio into a Melodyne blobs, you'll see in just a moment, and then it can also change that into a MIDI file. Here, let me show you. Okay, so here is an audio recording of one of the parts I played in Africa. And it's what I would call the marimba part that I played with my acoustic guitar. Anyway, this is what an audio file looks like. And I went ahead and brought in my video so that you can see. Now if we play this back, it's going to sound like me playing the guitar, because that's exactly what it was. So let's listen. Okay, so there you go. Well, of course it didn't sound like that in Africa. It sounded more like a marimba. And the way that we are able to do that is, as I pointed out, we use this program called Melodyne. So I'm going to click on the file, and in Studio One, which is my digital audio workstation, or my DAW for short, it's my DAW of choice, I can do it right from inside of Studio One. I hit Edit with Melodyne, and you can see it is analyzing now this audio file of mine. And when it gets done, let me expand that, it looks something like that. So, see these blobs? They represent the notes that I played, and believe it or not, in Melodyne, blob is the technical term for what these things are. Alright, now when you look at the audio file, you can see it now has changed, or it added a MIDI file on top of it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another track. And instead of it being an audio file track, I'm going to make it an instrument track. Okay, now there's nothing on the track at the moment. But if I click onto this audio file here and press Alt, I can drag it down onto this instrument track, and only the MIDI now will show, which is pretty cool. And this is what a MIDI file looks like. So you can see each of these are the notes that I played. Alright, if I was to try and play this, I'll mute this, and I hit play, you wouldn't hear anything, because this is just, again, information. It's just a message. So we need to add some type of sound source on top of this file. And that just requires what's called a virtual instrument. And I happen to have a bunch of them right here in my DAW. So I'm going to click on a stock one, that is one that came with PreSonus, called Presence. And I'm just going to place it right on top of here, and this is what it looks like. Now it has a keyboard so you can test the sounds out. So let's just say, for example, I was to, play a Les Paul guitar here. There you go. Alright, but what I'm going to do is put on the sound that I put on whenever I did this for the video. And, whoops, not winded brass, sorry, it's percussion. And there it is. So now the marimba sound is on here. Now listen to this part played And there you have it. I simply changed this audio file into MIDI notes using Melodyne, put that Melodyne file onto an instrument track, put an instrument onto the track so I could give it a sound source, and gave it the sound source of a marimba. And I did that with 4 different parts. I did a flute part, I did a gong, I did, I think, a pan flute, and then also this marimba. Let me show you the gong. I think you'll like this. So here is the instrument for a gong. I'll just put it on this track. Replace this one. And that's what it looks like. Here's what it sounds like. So when you hear that sound on Africa, it's not just an added sound. If you watch closely, you'll actually see me on the guitar strum or hit a note. And that's how I get that one sound. How about that? I actually played it. And there you have it. That's how I was able to play all those single note passages in Africa on the guitar, and yet they all sounded like a marimba or a flute or a gong or something like that, because I was able to change my guitar performance into a MIDI file and then add a virtual instrument on top of that MIDI file. Okay, that's it. If you haven't seen our Africa video, look for it on one of our YouTube channels. Check it out, and as well as any of the other videos that we've put together. We'd sure appreciate it. And if you have another song suggestion you'd like to hear, send it our way. Hopefully we'll get a chance to get to it and make a video. All right, thanks for all your support and for watching this video. See you later.